All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar with Gabriella Feingold on putting yourself first without the Jewish guilt. We do webinars on a monthly basis. We do webinars on all kinds of topics, things related about Jewish texts, Jewish women, and ways that you can improve your life and improve your opportunities as an Orthodox woman or as an Orthodox person in the Jewish community. So just a little bit about JOFA. We are the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. Our mission is to expand opportunities for people within the Orthodox community, particularly Orthodox women, and our initiatives range from advocating on behalf of Agunot, advocating for female rabbis, or doing things just like this, where we think about and talk about ways that you can better balance all of the different things in your life. So tonight we're joined with Gabriella Feingold. Hi, Gabriella.
Hello.
Gabriella Feingold works with women who have built their lives around taking care of other people and have no time or energy for themselves. She shows them how to sort through the noise of their competing priorities to figure out what is important to them, how to have healthier relationships with time and time management, and how to stop feeling guilty so they can finally create the intentional life they deserve. Which I can speak from personal experience, I know is a really important and difficult thing that a lot of people struggle with now. So we're really excited for this webinar. I'm also particularly excited that in this webinar, we're really gonna try and use the live chat feature that we can use with this platform. Gabriella and I were just reflecting that there are so many wonderful things we can do with technology these days. And especially you, the participants, everyone, wherever you're sitting, you can participate in the webinar that's happening right now. And we really encourage you to do so. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a live chat, and at the bottom, there's a little text box. Oh, there we go. Ashley DePhillips says, hey, from Toronto. Hey, Ashley. So that's going to be exactly where at points throughout the webinar, Gabrielle is going to ask for you to share reflections or to ask questions. And that's a great place where you can be submitting those thoughts. And I'm gonna hand it over to Gabriella right now, and I think that she's gonna address some questions that were submitted in advance with registration for the webinar. Okay, so over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shira, for hosting me, and to JOFA. I'm really glad to be able to discuss this topic of putting yourself first with all of you. I actually feel like this webinar was meant to be. I had a booth at the Limud New York conference, which is a retreat for Jews of all stripes to learn together for a weekend. And I had a poster behind me that just said, love yourself as your neighbor, which is a twist, obviously, on love your neighbor as yourself. And your executive director, Sharon, was passing by and saw that sign, and just because of, I felt that sign, just walked over and said, you should do a webinar with us. So I feel really grateful to be here. Before I jump straight in, I want to emphasize the interactive piece of this. Not so much a webinar as it is a workshop, really, an online workshop. So it's not your typical listen while you browse Facebook webinar. It's going to be interactive, and I know that's not the usual for a lot of webinars, and also for some of the webinars JOFA has done in the past, which is why I'm saying it again. So we're going to use the live chat feature to get some conversation going around what it means to put yourself first and what gets in the way, which is really our topic for tonight. So I want to try it out right now before we get started. If you look to the right of the video, that's where the chat is. And I want you to go in there and do two things. Just one is say hi, say your name if it's not obvious from your username, and tell me what you hope to get out of this 40 minutes or so that we're spending together tonight. So go ahead and say hi. And I'm gonna go over there so I can see you. Thank you, Ashley. I'm really happy to have you here. Ashley says, yes, I totally need this. Anyone else out there? Come on, guys, you can do it. Maybe I'm having some technical difficulties. Okay. Actually, I can't see Ashley anymore either.
Oh, here we go. Roz Singer.
Roz. Hi, Roz. Thank you. Lewis. Hoping to learn a bit about how to put myself first without feeling like I'm putting others second. Yes, we are definitely going to talk about that tricky dynamic tonight. I'm not sure if I need to like keep refreshing here.
Looks like Ashley.
Ashley, hi. Okay. How to set boundaries in everyday life to stop letting others deplete my energy. Boundaries are really important. Yes. Yeah, we're going to touch on some of the emotional dynamics around boundaries. And, you know, if you still have questions at the end, let me know and maybe we can address that in more detail. Julie, let's learn how to ask for what you need from the people in my life. Okay, and Zipporah has 3 young children and working full time. Great, okay, so it's working. Awesome. So we're actually going to, the one other piece of business before I get started is that you should actually also, in addition to the chat, grab paper and pen, potentially for taking notes if you want to, but more importantly, because the first thing we're going to do is jump right in and do some reflection questions on our own. And so I'm going to share my screen now so I can share my questions with you. And these are going to help us to start to think about what our life could look like if we were putting ourselves first. So let me share that with you. And if you don't have paper and pen already, now would be a good time to get it. And I'll wait, you know, a few seconds while people do that. Okay. All right, is it visible there?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay. So this exercise is, I like to call your ideal life. And it's really just a series of 6 questions to get you thinking before we jump into the rest. And after we do this exercise, I'll pause for a minute and come back and tell you a little more about me and a little bit about what we're covering tonight. So let's get started. These are the questions I want you to think about, and I'm going to read each of them to you in case you're not accessing the screen right now, and give you about a minute to answer each one. So we're only spending maybe 5 minutes on this. So let's do it. Number 1, what do you want your life to look like 1 year from now? What do you want your life to look like 1 year from now? Just jot down a few sentences. Take another few seconds for this question. Question number 2. In your ideal life, what would each day include? And you can answer this question by kind of writing out a schedule of an ideal day, if you're a quick thinker, or you can just write out a few ideas about the elements you would want to see in each day of your life. And we'll spend another 20 seconds or so answering what each day would look like in your ideal life. Excuse me. Question 3, if you had endless resources, what would you do that you aren't doing now? If you had endless resources, what would you do that you aren't doing now? Question 4, in your ideal life, what would you like to accomplish or experience? What would you like to accomplish or experience in your ideal life? Question 5, who do you surround yourself with in your ideal life? Who do you surround yourself with in your ideal life? And the last question, is there anything else, any other part of your vision of your ideal life that you just need to write down right now? Okay. So wrap up what you're writing. For now, you can always come back to it. It's not going anywhere. So, hi. I want to give you major kudos for jumping in and doing that exercise. And I also want to acknowledge, importantly, that answering these questions is not always easy and it's not always fun. For some people, it is actually really uncomfortable to envision your ideal life, to think about what you might want to be different in your life, and that is totally okay. So if you had anxiety come up, no problem, you're not alone. So whether your experience of this was positive or challenging, head over to the chat box and tell me what did you discover that you weren't expecting? What came up in these answers that surprised you? So I'm going to wait a few seconds for people to answer in the chat box. And if you're willing, share with us just what surprised you. I'll share when I've done this exercise for me, something that surprised me is that a lot of what I wrote was about space and having more space, and not so much about wanting other people or other commitments. It was really about, I want more time with me. It was a lot of, I want me, I want me, I want me, and not so much at all really about relating to other people. So that at the time surprised me. And I'm seeing from Ashley that she's surprised that she's ready to learn a new hobby like photography, and wanting freedom in so many areas. Yeah, freedom, that's a great one. And Rachel Feingold, who is, yes, related to Gabriella Feingold, wants a lot of things more than I think I have a right to. So that's really interesting, and definitely that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one because we're often taught about how fortunate we are compared to other people, and that we don't really have the right to want for more, and that can make us feel really guilty when we pursue. When we try to pursue our ideal life, that can make us feel really guilty and definitely get in the way. So let's keep an eye on that. And Lewis Paulison, I was surprised that my ideal day isn't that different, except that my workload from school would be much lighter. Well, that's good. That's great. It's always nice to look at your ideal and see that actually it's not that far away. So awesome. Great. So thank you everyone for jumping in straight away with that exercise. Again, I know this isn't really like a typical webinar, so I really am proud and impressed with your participation. So let me tell you a little bit more about me, and then what we're going to spend the rest of our time on. My name is Gabriella Feingold. I live in White Plains, New York, and I've been working in personal development for the past 6 years or so. I started off studying and applying interactive theater techniques to explore interpersonal conflict and to improve body image. And then I've spent a couple of years working in social justice and in the nonprofit sector at the American Jewish World Service and at HIAS, which is a global Jewish nonprofit for protecting refugees. And I am now doing this work with women who have built their lives around taking care of other people, and I help them to take care of themselves, which I know we could all use a little bit more of. So tonight, I'm going to take you through the 4 obstacles that I've found that prevent people, especially women, but really all people, from taking care of themselves. And for each of those obstacles, I will share with you my approach to getting past the obstacle in order to make change. And each of those obstacles, I'll also pose a question for reflection for you so that we can continue to kind of have a dialogue while I talk. So before we launch into these 4 obstacles that I'm going to go through, there's one overarching concept that defines my work that I want to share with you because it will apply to all of those obstacles. And that, in order to do that, I'm going to share my screen with you again so that you can follow along with these concepts. Okay. So the overarching concept that I want to talk about is what I call imperfect action. And yes, I call it imperfect on purpose, obviously. In order to make any mental, emotional, or circumstantial change, we need not to just think about it, but to actually act on it. And there are two defining parts of imperfect action. One is that we need to experience it in the body. We need to take action that isn't just in our heads. And this is where my theater background comes in, as you might imagine. Our bodies hold our memories, and we can't create change just by telling ourselves that we want it. We need to actually live it. Even if the change that we want is mental, we actually need to act on the change we want. And often that means acting before we are ready. That's why I emphasize imperfect action, because we are human, we are flawed, and any action that we take is going to be imperfect. So if we call it that from the beginning, we can allow ourselves to move forward in making change without waiting to be 100% certain of what's going to happen, because we can never be 100% certain. So imperfect action, that underlies all of the solutions that I'm going to jump into now. The 4 obstacles to getting to your ideal life. Obstacle number 1 is rejecting your vision. And what I mean by that is not really letting yourself dream or think about what you actually want your life to be like. And the reason we reject our vision is because we are really afraid to want. We are really afraid to be dissatisfied in our lives. And we're really afraid to need change. All of those things, to want, be dissatisfied, and want to change things in our lives, translates to us as instability. And we would like to avoid instability any way we can. So that's the first obstacle, is just not really letting ourselves think about what we want. So instead of that, the solution is intuitive, potentially, which is to allow yourself to want. It sounds obvious, but it's actually really difficult, because it means saying okay to being dissatisfied. It means saying, okay, I might have made a mistake in the past that brought me to where I am now, and being okay with that. And it also means being willing to make a mistake now, because we're not going to know 100% what will happen if we start working towards our vision. We may get it, we may not get it, we might end up in a completely different place than where we thought. And so allowing yourself to want means allowing yourself to be all of these things. And I'm happy to tell you that actually you have already taken a step towards this solution today in the exercise we just did. You allowed yourself to picture the life that you want, even though it might have brought to light some things you're unhappy with. And that takes real courage to allow. And so you've already taken that step. The next step would be taking that imperfect action I was talking about, and actually taking steps towards what you want, not just allowing it, but letting that vision actually start to be a part of your reality, taking imperfect action to help you line up with the vision that you see. But the imperfect action is not possible if we don't even let ourselves envision envision what we want. We have to let ourselves want it. So I want to ask you, what stops you from allowing your vision? And again, you can head over to the box, the chat box, and let us know what stops you from allowing your vision. I also want to mention, I'm going to come back here for a minute. I also want to mention that if it makes sense that you might not want to share in the chat box where everyone can see your name, that's totally fine. What I would do is reflect on these questions on pen and paper right in front of you, because by taking what I'm talking about into your real life and applying it to yourself, that will actually allow you to hold on to what I'm talking about a lot better and take it forward into your life. Okay. So Sima says, what if it's not so much that we don't allow ourselves to dream, but that our dreams and visions are impractical? That is a great question. I would argue that telling yourself that the dreams and vision is impractical is rejecting your vision. And obviously I can't speak to your exact experience without more information, but and that isn't to say that your vision will happen exactly the way you want it to, because we can't control that kind of thing. But telling yourself, I can't do that, it's impractical, that is rejecting your vision. So I would just challenge you on that a little bit. So I hope the rest of you took a moment to reflect on that on your own. And we're going to jump into our second obstacle. Let me share that with you again. Okay, so that was obstacle number 1. Obstacle number 2 is these limiting thoughts and emotional patterns that we all hold that just get in the way. Some of the ways that this shows up for people is that we think that we aren't good enough. We compare ourselves to other people. We try to be perfect. We get in our heads about how afraid we are of what might happen if we start to take care of ourselves in the way we really want to. And these thoughts and emotional patterns just spin around in circles and really keep us from taking action towards that ideal. So before I get to the solution for this one, I want to hear from you again, or take notes for yourself. What is your inner dialogue? What are the thoughts and fears that go around in your head that keep you from putting yourself first and taking steps towards the life you really want? I'm going to give you a minute if anyone would like to share in the chat box any of the thoughts that get in the way. You've already shared a bunch of them, in fact, about not deserving what you want, or it not being practical. So those are all limiting thoughts and emotional patterns that prevent us from taking action towards the life we want. Right. Ashley says that too, that it feels like you might not deserve it. Lewis says, I think that people will be upset or disappointed if I don't do X, Y, or Z. Yeah, so that is, that's really common. That, oh, I realized I'm still screen sharing. Hello. It's really common for people, especially giving and caring people, to care a lot about what other people think. And if we're not careful, that fear of what they think can actually stop us from doing what we need for ourselves. And there's not a simple solution to that. I'm not saying, just don't care. But I'll talk about the solution in a minute for that. And Shira says family members have conflicting wants and needs. Yes, that is also a tricky one. And I hope, I hope that some of what we talk about will address that, and we can come back to it also if you have questions at the end. So I'm going to come back to the screen here and share with you. So instead of letting those thoughts and emotional patterns control what we do and what we allow ourselves to do, the solution here is that you get to choose. You get to choose whether to listen to these limiting thoughts or to ignore them. They're not going to go away because this is part of the human experience. We can't just shut them out, but you get to choose whether to give them a platform, whether to say to your brain, oh, you must be right, or to say, I hear you, and I'm going to think about whether I want to listen to that. And then in the face of those limiting thoughts, you get to choose to act. You get to choose how to act. You get to choose whether to act in alignment with those limiting thoughts, or to push past them, or to sit and think about them. You get to choose is the point. You get to choose, finally, to embrace vulnerability, to allow that you might try things even if you won't succeed, to say to your brain, and I like to separate my brain from myself and say, oh, my brain tells me all these things. You get to say to your brain, hey, this might not go well, but I want to try it anyway. And this, of course, takes real courage. None of these solutions are simple, but they are possible. This one definitely takes courage to, in the face of scary thoughts, say, yes, but I'm going to do it anyway. And again, this takes imperfect action in order to retrain our brains to think more openly. You can't just have your brain tell you, oh, don't do this. This is too scary, and respond, no, it's not, and just go in this circle over and over again. You actually have to act imperfectly before you're ready in order to learn that it's okay to act differently than your brain is telling you to act. And honestly, you can go around in circles for years about taking care of yourself and putting yourself first. But unless you start doing it imperfectly and before you're ready, it will just stay as an idea in your head and will never become reality. So let's move on to obstacle 3 here. Obstacle 3 is a counterintuitive one potentially, and that is self-care. And what I mean by this is, obviously, I am totally on board with the intention of the concept of self-care, which is basically to take care of yourself, to spend time on yourself. That is all great. What I don't like is the way that we talk about self-care, which asks us to fit it in when we can, like just squish it in to our already very busy lives, as if that is enough. And at the same time, there's a lot of talk around self-care that's about prioritizing it and at the sacrifice of other things that you care about. So I heard, you know, from some of you in the chat box, if you have children and a full-time job, the concept of self-care, if it's making you feel like you need to sacrifice doing a good job at work or taking care of your children, that is not the solution. Sacrifice is not the solution. I will tell you what the solution is in a minute, but I find that this way of saying, oh, just fit it in where you can and let go of some other things so you have time is actually pretty dismissive of the actual challenges of our lives. It's just not that simple to put yourself first when you have other people depending on you. And in fact, I think Nechama mentioned not having enough time to do, in the chat box just wrote, not having enough time to do what everyone used to expect if I change the way I allocate my time and give more to myself, that you might have to sacrifice the things. Oh, I might be misunderstanding that. But in any case, this way of operating in self-care does not work for me and probably does not work for you either. So instead, the solution is to look at the full picture of your life. And this solution has two parts. The first part is you have to decide what's actually important to you, which is not an easy process, but it is well worth the time. And what it involves is looking at your values first and what makes you feel fulfilled and happy. And then looking at the way your commitments may or may not align with those values. Once you do that, you can slowly but surely actually let go of the commitments that don't have strong connections to your values. And when I say values here, I don't mean ethics. I don't mean what's right or wrong. I mean what makes you fulfilled. And so you can start to let go of those things because they're actually not worth your time and energy. And the second part of looking at the full picture is letting that, once you've freed up a little bit of room in your life, is to allow that free time, quote unquote, free time, to actually be used for yourself and to not fill it up with other people's needs like you might be used to doing. And that requires you to learn to say to yourself, I am allowed to come first. And this might be potentially the hardest part of all of these solutions, which is to actually admit that you are the main character in your own life. You are the main character in your own life, even if you care about other people, and that's okay. You are allowed to be the main character in your own life and come first sometimes. You don't have to be worried about becoming a selfish person. I'm telling you right now, anyone who's on this call, you don't need to be worried about becoming a selfish person. I'm not worried about you becoming a selfish person. You will still be a good giving person if you allow yourself to come first. You will just be a giving person who actually takes care of herself and what she wants. So I like to talk about the flight attendants on the airplanes. When they do the emergency instructions, they tell us that if the cabin becomes low pressure, masks will come down, and the mother on the airplane is required to put on her own mask before she can help people around her, before she can help her child even. And that means saying, I am allowed to come first. This is tricky because you probably don't actually believe it, which is really normal because that's not what we're taught. We're taught that we have to put everyone before us. And this, again, is where the imperfect action comes in, because you need to start acting like you are allowed to come first before your brain actually catches up to the truth of that. So let me ask you now to reflect for a minute on what would change for you if you could let go of some of the unimportant things in your life and maybe even allow yourself to come first. So take a minute to think about that. Shira, I want to check that the slides are working. Are you seeing the look at the full picture and the question on there?
The full picture question. I see obstacle. That's the slide I'm looking at.
Right, but it looks like on there.
If you could let go of unimportant things.
Yes, the question is on there?
The question is there. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. I wasn't seeing that for some reason. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yes, Ashley, I'm allowed to come first is a really hard mantra, a really good mantra. And Rachel says, do we have a right to be happy? Aren't our responsibilities more important than our happiness? That's a hard one. In my business of life coaching, I would say that our responsibility for making a better world and a good world starts with ourselves. That probably sounds a little cliche, but honestly, if you think about the people in your life who are taking care of themselves versus the people who self-sacrifice, often it's the people who actually do have good boundaries and do have time for themselves that end up being able to give the most back. So I really think that it starts with taking care of ourselves first. So I would say no, our responsibilities are not more important than our happiness. I would just disagree with that. Thank you for posing that question, because that's a good one. Oh, I keep forgetting to come back on screen. But anyway, we're gonna move straight on to the last obstacle, which is that a lot of the time people, all of us, try to make changes alone for our ideal when we're working towards our ideal. We tend to try to make these changes alone because we're afraid of failure and we're afraid of judgment. If we were to tell other people what we actually want and we don't get it, then we might be embarrassed. And that is all so normal. But the cost of that is that the process of working towards our ideal and working towards taking care of ourselves is much more painful. The reason, and it's painful because we're in our heads going around in circles about what we need to do, what we have the right to do, how to do it. We're hard on ourselves. We're much harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. We forget why which is so important. We forget why we might be trying to make the change that we want to make, which makes it a lot harder to stick to our commitment of taking steps forward. And lastly, it's painful because we also can't see what we might be missing. There are parts of the picture that we might not see because we're so busy being in our own heads. So the solution to this one is support and accountability. And what that looks like is having someone or multiple someones opposite you to hold you accountable to your choices and your decisions. And that person needs to be able to remind you what you want to change and why you want to change it. To be objective about the successes and failures that you experience along the way, and to encourage you in the face of those successes and failures, and to show you what might be missing. And all of these things are what makes for a much healthier process in putting ourselves first, in really making any change that we want to see, big picture in our lives. And for me, providing that support and accountability is the reason that I do the work that I do, so that my clients have a full system of support to help them make the change that they want to make. And I can speak from my own experience of having a coach, a life coach, and someone who helped me along the way in making changes in my life, that it made an incredible difference. That's really why I ended up on this path. So before we wrap up and take any questions, if there are any, I want to offer a couple of resources to you to provide the support and accountability that you might need to make change in your life. So the first one, and both of these are in the description of the video. The first one is a free download of my workbook, Taking Stock of What You Need, and the link is below. After this webinar, you might have a lot of thoughts spinning around. Often because you're self-aware and you're thoughtful and you've been listening to what I say, and now you have all these ideas about things you need to change. And often self-aware people have trouble discerning what they want as opposed to what they've been told to want. And that includes anything I've said tonight. I've told you the way that you should approach putting yourself first, and it's possible that that's not actually the way you want to make change. We can even be highly aware of the risk of prioritizing what other people have told us and still be confused. So this workbook is to help you sort that out and figure out what you actually want and what you need. So if you go down to the description of the video, you'll see a promo code, and that will let you download it for free on my website. And the second resource is that I want to offer you 18% off of a Custom Fit Life, which is my 5-week one-on-one coaching program to help you create the life you want, specifically without sacrificing the things you care about. I don't want you to have to dismiss the things that are important to you in order to be able to put yourself first. And this program really addresses all 4 obstacles that we talked about tonight. You'll find the link and the discount code for that in the description as well. I just want to note that you do have to book it in the next 2 weeks to get the discount. And my next availability for these sessions opens up on May 31st. So if you would like to take advantage of the discount, you can book the program now or sometime in the next 2 weeks, and then we'll schedule the session starting a few weeks from now. And the last resource I want to give you is to just reach out to me. I'm here to help. I want to support. I will direct you to any resources I can. And I would love to connect and to hear from you. So you can see my email there. I don't think that's in the description, so if you want to jot it down, My email is coach@gabriellafeingold.com. And you can also connect to me on Facebook at facebook.com/Gabriella Coaching. So to wrap up, let me just summarize quickly the 4 obstacles we went over. Obstacle number 1 is rejecting the vision, and the solution is allowing yourself to want. Obstacle 2 are the emotional and thought patterns that get in the way. And the solution there is that you get to choose how to act in the face of those patterns. Obstacle 3 is our limited concept of self-care. And what I want you to do instead is to look at the full picture of your life, which will allow you to let go of the things that don't serve you and allow yourself to come first. And obstacle number 4 is going it alone. And the solution is to find some form of support and accountability to help you make the change. So I'm going to come back on screen now. And Shira, do we have time for a couple of questions, or do we need to wrap up?
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions if people want to submit any.
Okay. I did come back on screen. Hello. Okay, so if anyone has questions, now's the time. I know a couple of you also emailed questions in advance. So if there aren't any other questions that people submit, I'll address a couple of those quickly. And then we'll wrap up.
Maybe you want to start with one of the ones that were submitted before.
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you who sent questions in advance, you asked some great stuff, so thank you. It's a little difficult to answer some of these questions without more information about the individual circumstances. As you can imagine, as a life coach, I'm very into individual solutions. So the question was, when I try to put myself first, I sometimes feel like I'm setting aside all of my other responsibilities, and the guilt makes me feel like it's not worth it. How do you find a balance between doing the things that make you feel like a good person in the outside world and carving out space for yourself, which in the best case only makes you feel good in your own inside world? So the guilt that you're feeling around putting aside your other responsibilities, I would say that guilt comes from the feeling that you are not doing enough in those areas of your life. If you felt like you were already dedicating enough time and energy to those responsibilities, you wouldn't feel the guilt when you went to take care of yourself. So it's not so much about finding a balance as it is a shift in perspective on your commitments, what you're committed to, and on taking care of yourself. So this would require looking at the full picture again, looking at those commitments, asking yourself why it constantly feels like you aren't giving those responsibilities enough of your time. It probably means letting go of some perfectionism so that it's okay to not give 100% of yourself to each of those responsibilities. I like to think of it this way. We only have 100% of ourselves to give to any part of our lives. And some of that 100% actually needs to go to ourselves. If we were to give 100% of ourselves to any one of our responsibilities, then there would be nothing left for anything else, including ourselves. So once you feel like what you do and who you are is enough, it's no longer a matter of guilt to take care of yourself. It's just a matter of living a full human life where you are part of the equation. So I'll end that there. And I don't see any further questions. So, Shira, should I answer the other one from the?
Yeah, why don't we take one of the last questions that we had submitted in advance?
Okay. So here it is. So the question was, this is such a great question. How can we make the math work? Sometimes it seems like there aren't enough hours in the day to exercise, make healthy meals, pray, have optimal sleep hygiene, and make space for nothing, in addition to all of the other potential responsibilities. Even if we eliminate those tasks, there still seems to be a remarkable amount of work to be done. Prioritizing helps, but there still seems to be a large gap between what can be realistically completed in 24 hours. So I totally agree that this is a major issue, that we just try to fit too much in. Unfortunately, it's not one that I can answer completely in broad terms without more information, because making the math work of your life is really individual and would involve, again, that same process of looking at your commitments. The one thing I will say is that I'm going to echo some of what I said in the last question, which is that we need to define for yourself what it means to have done enough for your health, or done enough for your children, or done enough for housekeeping or for your job. Because the reason the math doesn't add up is, again, because you're trying to dedicate 100% of yourself to your children, 100% of yourself to your job, and that's just not possible because there's only 100% of us to go around. So we first need to let go of not being good enough, and then we can look at the hours in the day and how that plays out. So that's what I have to say for that. And I know there were a few other questions. If you had questions, if you were on the call and you have questions, or if you sent me a question and we didn't have a chance to answer it, feel free to email me. I would love to chat further and point you in whatever direction would be helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gabriella. That was really wonderful. It was really informative. And I think that was like a great use of our live chat feature that we haven't
Yeah, thank you everyone for giving that a try. I know it was a little scary, and I hope for those of you who didn't feel comfortable doing that you had a chance to reflect on your own, which is just as good. And that what I really wanted to experience together was a sense of how common all of this is. It's really a shared experience that we all have, and when we can admit to ourselves that it's just part of being human, then it gets a lot easier. Yeah. So thank you for having me. It was really great.
Yeah, of course. That was wonderful. And so just remember that if you're looking for some further resources, Gabriella has been kind enough to offer some special offers, and you can find those in the description of the event. And if you're interested in seeing other webinars that JOFA has done, you can go to www.jofa.org. And under resources, there's a tab for webinars, and you can find our webinar archive. And you can follow us on Facebook. You can like us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. We're always doing lots of different types of programming. Just to shout out for a couple of things that are coming up. On May 9th, we are partnering with the National Council of Jewish Women in New York for an event on reproductive justice. It's about awareness and education around reproductive rights and legislation, specifically in the state of New York, and work that we can do around that. We always have, you can always listen to The Joy of Text. That's another program we run. It's a podcast that we do. You can find The Joy of Text on any podcast app. That's a podcast about sex and halacha with our president, Dr. Batsheva Marcus, and Rabbi Dov Linzer. And other programs that we do. We also have the blog that we're always running. So if this brought up any thoughts, if it made you feel really passionate about something you think that you want to write about, you can email me, shira@jofa.org, to write for our blog, or you can follow our blog on the Jewish Week. We're right up there at the top of their website. So thank you so much. I hope that you will follow up with Gabriella if you have any questions, and that you will join JOFA for future programming, or just follow us on Facebook and on our website. Thank you so much.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.